two legendary artists, two contrasting personalities, and a feud that became part of history. Did you know that John Lennon and Bob Dylan, they were the voices of their generation? One, the rebellious poet of folk music, the other, the leader of the most famous band in history. But beneath the mutual admiration lay tension, misunderstandings, and a rivalry that left fans divided. What caused John Lennon and Bob Dylan to drift apart? Was it ego, ambition, or something deeper? Let's explore the untold story of one of music's greatest feuds. The golden years of friendship. To understand the feud, we must first look at the friendship that once existed. In the early 60s, Bob Dylan was a folk hero with songs like "Blowin' in the Wind" defining the counterculture movement. Meanwhile, the Beatles were climbing the pop charts with hits like "I Want to Hold Your Hand." But things changed in 1964. The Beatles' meeting with Dylan wasn't just a handshake between legends, it was a turning point in music history. Dylan encouraged the Beatles to explore deeper themes in their lyrics, while Lennon introduced Dylan to the rock and roll scene. It was a creative exchange that transformed both artists. Dylan's influence on Lennon's writing. Dylan's influence on Lennon's songwriting was undeniable. Before Dylan, Lennon's lyrics were simple and catchy. After Dylan, they became personal, reflective, and poetic. Critics have called songs like "You've Got to Hide Your Love Away" Lennon's tribute to Dylan, marking a shift from pop simplicity to artistic depth. A clash of titans. But as their friendship grew, so did their differences. Dylan's disdain for mainstream fame and Lennon's struggle with being a global icon became sources of friction. In 1965, Dylan released Fourth Time Around, a track that many saw as a parody of Lennon's Norwegian Wood. Was Dylan mocking Lennon? And if so, why? Some say Dylan felt that Lennon was borrowing too heavily from his style, while others believe it was Dylan's way of challenging Lennon to be more original. Lennon later admitted, "I didn't know whether he was kidding or criticizing. It made me paranoid." Ego, fame, and misunderstandings. Ego played a significant role in their fallout. Both were seen as the voice of a generation, but their paths diverged drastically. Dylan rejected commercialism and embraced abstract experimental music. Lennon, while exploring his own artistry, was still deeply tied to the Beatles' pop success. Dylan once commented, "The Beatles are great, but they're not challenging the system." It was a subtle jab that Lennon couldn't ignore. Was this simply artistic rivalry, or did Dylan resent Lennon for his fame? The height of the feud. In the late 60s, the tension reached its peak. Lennon's frustration with Dylan's subtle jabs became more apparent in his music and interviews. While Dylan's Fourth Time Around might have been playful mockery, Lennon's response was sharper. Critics believe tracks like "How Do You Sleep" weren't just directed at Paul McCartney, but carried undertones of Lennon's feelings towards Dylan. One journalist described it as two alpha artists staking their claim as cultural icons. Turning point. A changing relationship. By the 1970s, the rivalry began to fade. Both artists had faced personal struggles, Lennon with his break from the Beatles, and Dylan with his family life and evolving career. Though they never returned to their early camaraderie, they shared a mutual respect in their later years. Dylan, in interviews, praised Lennon's honesty and rawness, while Lennon admitted that Dylan was always a source of inspiration. The legacy of their feud. So what did this feud achieve? More than just a clash of egos, it pushed both artists to their creative limits. Dylan refined his abstract poetry, setting the stage for masterpieces like a Rolling Stone. Lennon, inspired and challenged, created deeply personal albums like Plastic Ono Band. Music historian Mark Kemp once said, "Without the Lennon-Dylan rivalry, the evolution of modern music would have been slower and less dynamic." Final reflection and thought-provoking ending. John Lennon and Bob Dylan, Two legends who inspired, challenged, and occasionally provoked each other. Their feud wasn't just about disagreement, it was about pushing boundaries and redefining what music could be. Was this rivalry a necessary ingredient for their greatness? Or could they have achieved even more as allies? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into music history. As Dylan once said about Lennon, he was one of a kind. There'll never be another like him.